The honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay, will lead the national anthem today.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Quand embrasse porter le pays, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillant exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
I think I got this right now. Let the doors be open. Que l'on ouvre les portes. Déclaration des députés.
Statements by members. The honourable member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to note that in 1929, on October 18th, the highest court of appeal in Canada recognized women as persons, Mr. Speaker, under the law. It may seem strange, but that is the case. So on October 18th, we celebrate this day, and it reminds me of all of the women who became pioneers in our beautiful country, so that a person like me could rise in this house today. It reminds me of my grandmother, who had a business in Montreal in the 1940s. Mr. Speaker, she didn't even have the right to have a bank account, and she had a business. So this is a day where we need to remember that our rights as women should never be taken for granted. We must always protect them. We must never go backwards. The honourable member for York Simcoe.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister is running our country like he's the captain of the Titanic. He justified his record-high spending because interest rates were at historic lows. He encouraged Canadians to keep borrowing because those rates would stay low. He may as well said our country's finances were unsinkable. The captain of the crew of this ship ignored all the warnings about icebergs. And look where we are today. Inflation and interest rates are hitting record highs. Canadians are now running to the lifeboats as the cost of food, fuel, and home heating continue to climb. Too many people are losing their jobs, their homes, their savings, and any hope they had for the future. It was hubris that sunk the Titanic, but it's arrogance and entitlement from this Prime Minister that's sinking Canadians now. Conservatives will right the ship by axing the tax on gas and groceries. We will end inflationary deficits. Let's give Canadians a lifeline and bring it home.
The honourable member for Markham-Stouffville.
Speaker, our government's New Horizons for Seniors program provides funding for projects that make a difference in the lives of seniors and their communities. Last year, the Street Art Seniors of Stouffville, also known as SAS, received support from the New Horizons for Seniors grant. SAS is exactly the kind of initiative New Horizons was created to support. It provides seniors with an opportunity to express themselves, supports their inclusion in the community, addresses social isolation and ageism. A few weeks ago, Street Art Seniors of Stouffville received a Community Impact Award for elevating the spirit and quality of life in the community. It's a wonderful example of the incredible talent and innovative initiatives happening in Stouffville. Thank you to Margaret Wallace, Jennifer Onlock, and the team at the Latcham Art Gallery for your leadership and hard work. Thank you to the seniors who took part, and thank you to everyone who helped make this project a reality.
L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Société Saint-Jean-Baptiste has just honored the memory of one of the greatest hockey players in Quebec's history, Mike Bossy, who sadly passed away too young last year. For this Maurice Richard Award, which recognizes Quebecers who have risen to the rank of the greatest athletes, it's hard to think of a more deserving candidate than Mike Bossy. What he has achieved may never be seen again. He was the first after the Rocket to score 50 goals in 50 games, the first rookie to score at least 50 goals in a year. His 9 consecutive seasons with 50 or more goals is an unparalleled feat. With 4 Stanley Cups and countless trophies to his credit, the New York Islanders right winger has earned his place in the Hall of Fame. The son of Ukrainian immigrants, Mike Bossy has carved out a special place in the hearts of Quebecers, both on the ice and during his long career in French-language media. This great athlete has left his mark on Quebec in more ways than one. Hats off to Mike Bossy. The Honourable Member for Orleans. Mr. Speaker.
Stand in the House today to recognize all the incredible small business owners in the community of Orléans and across Canada as we are celebrating Small Business Week. Whether it's local young entrepreneurs like Maïssa Zemni of Makeup by Maïssa Zemni, Elizabeth and Jordan, founders of Art of Being Coffee Co., or a small family business such as Beyond Cafe, located on Saint-Joseph Boulevard and owned by Ella, Vaid, and Asti Mechi. Small businesses are the heart of our communities, the backbone and the engine of our local economy. Mr. Speaker, let's celebrate each and every one of them for their achievement and their hard work. Let's continue to support our small businesses and the people behind them. Bonne semaine.
Happy Small Business Week to all small businesses in Orleans and Canada. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and congratulations on your election. Throughout the country, requests for help with food are skyrocketing. People who donated food in the past now have to ask for help themselves. Fortunately, community organizations continue to hold the fort and to work miracles to help families in Quebec and especially in my riding. I'm thinking in particular of Frigo Val Boncoeur, the Boîte à Fringales, Frigo Partage de Loretteville, Frigo Amélie et Frédéric, the St. Vincent de Paul Society, Rayon de Soleil, the Comptoir Agostine de Wendake, Accueil Saint-Ambroise de Loretteville, Solidarité Famille, and Le Piolet, among others. These are organizations that directly help people who are in need. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you to each of these hundreds of volunteers who help us. I'm appealing to everyone who's in a position to donate. Every dollar counts. Every item counts. Let's be generous. The Honourable Member for Toronto-St. Paul.
Speaker, this morning on this Person's Day, I walked over to the truly powerful Famous Five statue in front of the Senate building to reflect on the progress made since these pioneering women fought to have women declared as persons. I think they would be proud. There's now parity of women in our Senate, parity of women in Cabinet, 30% women in the House of Commons, pensions, Medicare, childcare, dental care, almost 60% of women in the workforce, the highest in the OECD. We have made serious efforts to address violence against women, the original goal of the Famous Five and their temperance movement colleagues. Today, we remember the clarion call of the formidable Nellie McClung. Never retreat, never apologize. Get the thing done and let them howl. So today we honor and thank the Famous Fives. We will get the equality thing done and let the misogynists howl.
The Honourable Member for London West.
I rise in this House to condemn the attacks conducted by Hamas on October 7th, and I call on Hamas to release and safely return the Israeli hostages to their loved ones. I condemn the airstrike on the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital from yesterday. What we're witnessing in Gaza is a humanitarian catastrophe. Over 1 million people have now been displaced. 3,000 have been killed. A third of them are children. I implore us to exhaust all tools that would allow humanitarian corridors to open for humanitarian aid to reach Palestinians. Now, more than ever, we need governments to work together to de-escalate the situation in Gaza and ensure the safety of innocent civilians. My deepest condolences go out to every single person that has lost a loved one on either side of this conflict. Jewish and Palestinian communities are looking for leadership to see their humanity. That is our job as leaders, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member from Dauphin Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this Prime Minister has added more to Canada's national debt than all other previous Prime Ministers combined. The Prime Minister told Canadians that his government would take on debt so Canadians wouldn't have to. But now, Canadians are paying the price for this Prime Minister's massive deficits and inflationary spending. After $500 billion of inflationary deficits, the Bank of Canada was forced to hike interest rates 10 times in just 19 months. And now, monthly mortgage payments have increased by 150% since this Prime Minister took office. To keep up with this Prime Minister's inflationary spending, Canada will spend $240 billion over the next 5 years to service our debt. The Prime Minister is wrong. It's not the government who is taking on the debt, it's Canadians. Canadians won't be fooled. They know that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost.
Honourable member for Cambridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week we celebrate the 44th annual Small Business Week. Small business owners are the backbone of Canada's economy and the heart of our communities. And every October we celebrate their resilience and entrepreneurial spirit. Over the last few years, the challenges of running a small business have changed dramatically. But entrepreneurs across Canada have recovered, innovated, and adapted, Mr. Speaker. Through it all, our government has been there to support them. From the Canada Emergency Business Account, keeping doors open during the pandemic, to the Canada Digital Adoption Program, helping businesses compete in the digital era, to programs helping underrepresented groups fulfill their entrepreneurial goals, our government has been there for small business, Mr. Speaker. As the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Small Business, I am excited to roll up my sleeves and get to work with entrepreneurs and small business owners across the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Regina Leuven.
After 8 long, miserable years, Canadians are sick and tired of this NDP Liberal government. The Liberal ministers were happy to take a photo op with grocery CEOs and then promise that prices would go down before Thanksgiving. Well, Thanksgiving has come and gone, and the prices continue to climb. Yet another broken promise by these Liberals. Canadians just can't trust anything they say. First, the industry minister met and said he has a plan to lower food prices. Then he said prices are stabilizing and Canadians should look for this in their local grocery flyers. Now he seems to have no idea what's going on. What this Prime Minister needs to realize is just like budgets, grocery bills will not balance themselves. All Canadians know that this Prime Minister simply is not worth the cost.
The honourable member from Battle River, Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, housing costs have doubled and people are struggling to pay their mortgages and make rent, something that affects small towns and big cities across Canada and Canadians both young and old. In a series of town halls and meetings I hosted last week, the number one concern I heard about was the cost of living, leading to a genuine fear about the future. After 8 years, this Liberal Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. Conservatives demand that the Liberals bring back a balanced budget, since we've painfully learned that budgets don't balance themselves. Goldie Hyder from the Business Council of Canada recently said, and I quote, "With long-term interest rates at the highest they've been in years, it is irresponsible to suggest that economic growth will be higher than interest rates for years to come. Governments can no longer run permanent large deficits without fear. It's time to balance the budget to bring home lower prices for Canadians."
The honourable member from Châteauguay-Lacolle.
Mr. Speaker, as we mark Persons Day and pay tribute to the famous five, I'd like to highlight the contribution of Thérèse Casgrain, another great Canadian woman whose efforts not only enabled Quebec women to obtain the right to vote in 1940, but who fought throughout her life to improve the situation of Quebec women. Her political work, commitment, and achievements are examples that inspire many of us to this day. She became head of the Social Democratic Party, and she became the first woman leader of a political party in Canada. She was appointed senator, a person, in 1970. Mr. Speaker, the famous five, Thérèse Casgrain, and the women of that era who fought for our rights, opened the doors for us. Let's make sure we keep them wide open. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Nunavut.
Despite the harsh colonial and genocidal policies that my mom was forced to endure, my mom had the strength to have faith and teach me about love and forgiveness, as with many Indigenous peoples. I am comforted in knowing my mom is finally at peace. If she had access to great programs like those provided by Dashinta, I think she would have worked harder to stop intergenerational trauma being passed on to her great-grandchildren. Organizations like Dashinta are important because they show the benefits of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leadership in helping each other. Their funding is running out, and we must ensure sustainable funding toward healing and cultural programs to continue without interruption. I call on all members to be champions of organizations like Dashinta in your ridings. Together, we can break systemic racism and act on reconciliation.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, in one of their beautiful songs, Beau Dommage sang that all of their nightmares happen at 6 o'clock on television. These words sadly resonate with the difficult times in which we live. Ukraine, Nagorno-Karabakh, Gaza, everywhere, war sows tears and desolation, and there will be no winners. Who wins when children die? Who wins when civilians are strewn across deserted streets, when hospitals where the sick and wounded seek care and refuge are bombed? Who wins? Which God will rejoice over the death of a child? Which government will proudly claim the death of a grandmother? What cause justifies the tears, the pain, the grief? Who is proud of humanity, Mr. Speaker? Who would tell us, seeing our weakness in the face of the climate emergency and our fervor when it comes to killing each other, keep up the good work? I don't know how it's all going to end, and I have no desire to see the results of these dark days, but I do know that humanity must pull itself together. I know that we need to pull ourselves together, Mr. Speaker. I know one thing. We have to be better than this, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Mission Matsqui, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, small business owners are the unsung heroes of the Canadian economy. These entrepreneurs make up almost 98% of all employer businesses, employ nearly 2/3 of the private labor force, and provide meaningful paychecks to millions of Canadians. But after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, I doubt that small business owners feel like unsung heroes. Higher inflation, higher payroll taxes, higher carbon taxes, a labor crisis, higher rent, more red tape, and increased crime rates are hurting Main Street businesses across Canada. Business insolvencies continue to rise at alarming rates year over year and month over month. More businesses are closing than opening. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. That's right. This Small Business Week, I want small business owners to know that Conservatives are hearing your challenges, and we are committed to axing Trudeau's carbon tax, lowering business taxes, and fostering an environment where small businesses are able to grow, innovate, and create powerful paychecks once again.
Great job.
The honourable member from Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, today is a special day for all the women in this room and indeed across Canada. It is Persons Day. On October 18, 1929, the Privy Council of England ruled that women are indeed persons under the law. This victory was the result of a long and courageous legal battle by Canadian women known as the Famous Five. This ruling allowed women to fully participate in political life. However, not all women. Indigenous, Black, and Asian women were not included until much later, and women from diverse backgrounds faced discriminations which limited their ability to participate. The struggle persists, Although we have made progress, women as a group, and even more so marginalized women, continue to be underrepresented. Persons Day reminds us to continue the fight begun by the Famous Five until we achieve equal representation for all women and gender-diverse people, because there cannot be true democracy unless women's voices are clearly heard. Thank you.
Comme elle avait promis avant la semaine de relâche, la présidence souhaite faire une déclaration à propos de l'ordre.
As promised before the break week, the Speaker would like to make a statement about order and decorum in the House.
Après 8 ans de ce gouvernement, le taux d'inflation.
After 8 years with this government, inflation is the highest it's ever been in Quebec.
The honourable member, you'll have an opportunity to start with oral questions once I just make this statement to the House. Question period will follow immediately after this statement.
Question period.
Jeremy? May I ask the honourable member, please, to take his seat for a moment while I consult with the table. So, colleagues, the Speaker has the choice as to when to start question period. There will be a full question period that will follow after this declaration from the Speaker. It's important for us to make this declaration. Point of order. The Honourable House Leader from the Opposition.
Just like to remind the Chair of Standing Order 5A, time for statements by members, oral questions, orders of the day. At 2 p.m. on Mondays, not later than 2:15 p.m., as the case may be, oral questions shall be taken up. Not may be taken up, shall be taken up. It's well past 2:15, Mr. Speaker.
After consultation with the table, it is important for members to understand that we have dérogé de cette habitude de commencer.
That we have moved away from starting exactly on time.
Le président, la présidence va faire cette déclaration.
The Speaker will make a statement. It's not my intention to make this a habit. But according to the standing orders, I do have the opportunity of starting oral questions after my statement.
The honourable member from Regina.
The Speaker ought to know when rules are not followed, when there is a derogation from a rule, when that is pointed out to the Speaker then enforces the rules. These standing orders are the property of the House. It's up to the House to decide when we're not going to follow a rule or when we're going to change a rule. This is a standing order that the House has adopted. You are a servant of the House. You should follow the standing order.
I'd like to thank the honourable member from Regina Capel for pointing out the standing orders, and indeed he is correct. There are written standing orders. However, there is a long tradition in this House that the Speaker has the ability to making sure. Can I ask the honourable member to please allow me to finish as I have the floor at this time? I'll be happy to recognize the honourable member for a point of order. It is really important that we understand that the Speaker does have this ability to make a statement. We will have full oral questions at the end of this statement from the Speaker. It is an important message, which I think members would appreciate hearing, because it gives an indication as to how the Speaker is going to be proceeding in the months and years to follow. Colleagues.
As promised before the constituency week.
Order, the honourable member from Carleton.
Every day in this House, the opposition has the occasion to respond to the actions of and hold the government accountable for its actions on behalf of Canadians. That happens at 2:15 every single Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. That is not a may, that is not a possible, that is a shall. There is nothing in the clause that creates question period in the standing orders that allows the Speaker to arbitrarily change the time in order to give a speech. I will note that the Speaker has a plethora of occasions to stand on his feet and make any point he wants or any declaration he likes. He does not need to do it in the middle of the sacred period during which we hold the government to account. Now, I see, now, if I'm Mr. Speaker, if I may, this is the first time in all of my years here that I have seen a Speaker interrupt question period to make a speech. I've never seen it. I've never seen it. And I furthermore, the fact that you've risen to your feet in order to impose apparently a series of guidelines that are not approved by the Board of the Internal Economy or voted on by the House of Commons, and that you're doing it in violation of one of the existing rules that is already in place, suggests a very serious and unusual departure from the normal way in which Parliament exists. The government is here to serve Parliament, not the other way around. We ask that you allow us to proceed with question period and you make your statement afterwards.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for Carleton for his intervention. I would like to inform the House, though, this is not the first time that the Speaker has interrupted the proceedings to make a statement from the chair between the point of SO31s and oral questions. Colleagues, so that everybody can understand this very clearly, my immediate predecessor, for example, has done this at least on 2 occasions. It also has been done by speakers in the past. I'm going to continue with this statement. I think it's important for all members to understand this, and I'd like to reassure the member from Carleton and all members that there are going to be no new standing orders that would require the approval of you members. But we're talking about, I invite you to listen to this statement. I would invite you to listen to this statement in order to be able to improve order and decorum in this House. Come.
Disorder in this House. That's what you've done.
Comme elle avait promis avant.
As promised before the constituency week, the chair would like to make a statement on order and decorum in the House. In a very simple way, order and decorum are signs of respect for each other and for the institution. Respect, which is necessary for productive debate in a deliberative assembly. It is, in fact, fundamental to Parliament's ability to fulfill its constitutional role.
I decided to stand for Speaker because in the 8 years that I've been a member, and prior to that as a keen follower of parliamentary proceedings, I've noticed a deterioration in the collective decorum in this place. It is important to note that this deterioration was not inevitable. It is not a natural outgrowth of the advent of social media. We can choose to conduct ourselves differently. I suspected other members felt the same way, and during the many discussions that I held recently with members from all sides of the House, confirmed this feeling. Decorum and disorder was the one issue that was most often mentioned to me in the one-on-one exchanges that I had, and not just in passing. Perhaps most importantly of all, members felt that bad behavior dishonors not only ourselves as elected members of Parliament, but also dishonors Canadian democracy. Le 3 octobre 2000.
On October 3rd, 2023, when I was invited to take the chair for the first time, I said, we need to make sure that we treat each other with respect and that we show Canadians an example, because there can be no dialogue unless there is mutual understanding of respect. There can be no ability to pursue arguments, to make points be heard, unless we all agree to extend to each other that sense of respect and decorum.
La citation. J'en étais alors.
I meant it then. I mean it now.
Members should not be surprised by my statement today. Not long ago, on May 8th, 2023, my predecessor rightly said, in a ruling on decorum which can be found at page 14,090 of the Bates, quote, "The rules and practices governing order and decorum are intended in part to ensure that proceedings are conducted in a civil, courteous, and respectful manner. In particular, members are expected to address each other through the chair and to avoid making any offensive or disruptive remarks. For example, stating directly or indirectly that a colleague is a liar or has lied is unacceptable," unquote. The honourable member from has raising a point of order.
I would usually ask if this was a filibuster, but for the purposes of planning, I'm wondering if the Speaker might indicate to the House how long he expects to continue.
The member, this should continue it's not a point of order first, thank you, but I will let members know that it will continue for the time that it will take. It shouldn't be too long. So after... The House is a place where freedom of speech is primordial and where views are strongly held and vigorously defended. While the chair must allow the widest range of individual expression possible, members are expected to be mindful of their words and behaviors within the realm of what would be considered parliamentary. Je réitère les propos du président.
I wish to echo the words of Speaker Milliken. which can be found at page 3719 of the October 5, 2006 debates, and I quote, "But the exercise of that freedom of speech ought to be based on the underlying principle of respect to the House and to other members. Conduct should not cause a disruption to proceedings." It would be an understatement to say that we have been plagued in recent weeks by what any observer would have to admit is an unusually noisy chamber, particularly during question period. Some of the disorder is being triggered by questionable language or provocative statements, but much of it also appears to be generated by interruptions, interjections, or other demonstrations, actions that seem to be designed to drown out or plainly disrupt those asking questions or those answering them. But when the noise reaches levels where no one, not even the Speaker, can hear what is being said, the House as a whole loses some credibility. So, I appeal to all honorable members for cooperation. I will continue to try to give members wide latitude in expressing their points of view. But I ask for all members' assistance in ensuring that we can all hear the member who's been recognized and who has the floor, end quote. Going forward, I will be fair and will ensure that all members, regardless of which side of the House they sit on, can freely speak their minds, vigorously hold the government to account, challenge each other's ideas, and thoroughly consider public business. As your Speaker, I will equally be looking for ways of improving the overall decorum in the House, and I will be dogged in that pursuit.
I commit to doing this as your servant and to enforce the rules that you yourselves have given the House on your behalf. I will do so with humility and also with an outreached hand. Within our purview, all the chair occupants will work collectively to ensure that the rules of order and decorum are respected, applied consistently, and to the same standards. As another one of my predecessors, the member for Regina Capel, stated on December 12, 2012, at pages 13,215 and 13,216 of debates, quote, "My task as Speaker is to ensure that the intensity of feelings expressed around some issues is contained within the bounds of civility without infringing on the freedom of speech that members enjoy. The Chair tries to ensure that our rules are adhered to in a way that encourages mutual respect. However, all members will recognize that ultimately the Speaker must depend on their collective self-discipline to maintain order and to foster decorum. My authority to enforce the rules depends on the cooperation of the House. Our electors expect all members to make greater efforts to curb disorder and unruly behavior. So I urge all members to reflect on how best to return to the House to the convivial, cooperative atmosphere I know all of us would prefer." Unquote. Étant donné l'esprit collégial.
Because of the collegial character of the House and the broad privileges enjoyed by its members, no one, not even the Speaker, can act unilaterally to improve the level of decorum in the chamber. Despite my own strong individual determination to maintaining the dignity and decorum of the House, ultimately those efforts will come to naught without members themselves taking responsibility for their behavior and conduct and showing their own personal efforts in comporting their business in an appropriate and civil manner. I will therefore need your help in order to succeed.
Observed over the years as a member, the following issues have deteriorated and need to be addressed. First, excessive, disruptive, and loud heckling must be toned down. Occasional heckling has always been a part of our proceedings, and a light-hearted or clever comment will often enhance debate rather than detract from it. However, far too often, heckling is boorish and rude, designed to intimidate, insult, or drown out others. Members have a right to be heard and to hear the proceedings going on around them. The frequent and time-consuming disorder it creates must stop. Excessive interruptions must be curtailed. Deuxièmement, bien que je sois...
Second, while I'm committed to protecting the individual privilege of freedom of speech necessary for our debates, too frequently, our ideas and thoughts are expressed in provocative terms, leading to tense exchanges that harm the necessary collegiality for our work. We have in the past had members likening their colleagues to Mussolini, or calling each other racists, or shouting obscenities. Latitude in expressing one's point of view will be given, but questionable language and unnecessarily provocative statements will not be tolerated.
Finally, the growing tendency to make pointed criticism in a way that is unnecessarily personal and designed to denigrate, bully, elicit an emotional reaction, or to attack the integrity of the person introduces a toxicity to our proceedings which hampers our ability to get things done. This includes coming up with fake titles for members in order to mock them, or comments that questions their courage, their honesty, or their commitment to their country. I would also include comments designed to draw attention to the absence of members as a means of embarrassing them, even though this is against our rules. As many of my predecessors have underscored, there are multiple places members must go to fulfill their duties. I will point out, there are examples of these sorts of comments on all sides of the House. Insofar as personal attacks can be limited, I will use whatever tools I have at my disposal to do so. Les problèmes que j'ai soulignés se manifestent sur...
The above-mentioned issues tend to be displayed most prominently during statements by members and daily question period. This is unfortunate, because this is when our proceedings receive the most attention from those watching or from the public in the galleries, and from which clips are most widely circulated on social media. These are the issues I will focus most of my efforts on resolving. While the House is master of its own proceedings and the Speaker its servant, the Chair has the authority to enforce rules of debate to maintain order and decorum so that the House may conduct its business in an orderly fashion. The standing orders of the House state explicitly that the Speaker shall preserve order and decorum and decide questions of order. This duty, which extends to the other chair occupants, carries with it a wide-ranging authority covering matters as diverse as the behavior and attire of members, the conduct of proceedings, the rules of debate, and disruptions on the floor of the chamber and its galleries.
As such, any challenge to the authority of the chair by refusing to respect a call to order, to withdraw language ruled to be unparliamentary, to cease irrelevance and repetition in debate, or to stop interrupting a member who has the floor, can be addressed through recourse to a number of options. For instance, the chair may recognize another member or refuse to recognize a member until the offending remarks are retracted and the member apologizes immediately in person or at a later time in writing to the Speaker. As a last resort, the chair may name a member, the most severe disciplinary power at the Speaker's disposal. In the days and weeks ahead, as I proceed as outlined above, I will continue my discussions with individual members as well as with House officers in the different parties to see how we can join forces in our collective objective to improve the decorum in our proceedings. Je remercie les députés.
I thank all members for their attention and invite them to reflect on the statement I've made today. I also wish to indicate that members are always free to come and see me if they wish to discuss the matter further. I thank the members.
Questions orales, oral questions. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 8 long years of this Prime Minister, he's not worth the cost, and especially in Quebec, where the inflation rate has hit 4.8%, higher than elsewhere in Canada. After 8 years of inflationary deficits, the solution proposed by the Liberals and the Bloc is to significantly increase costs through a tax on gas and diesel that will increase the cost of every product that's transported. Will they put an end to these inflationary policies so that Quebecers can buy food and gas and housing? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have no lessons to take from the Conservatives. What the Conservatives are proposing for the Canadians listening to us is to cut services, cut investments, and cut the future of Canada. We have a plan to help Canadians prosper in the 21st century economy. And what Canadians are realizing is that the Conservatives are too dangerous for our country. Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, I will ignore that member's lack of decorum and his emotionally charged approach to focus on Canadians. Because I can actually take it. I can take the debate and have it out in the open. Mr. Speaker, he talks about cuts. Canadians are making cuts in their own lives. We now have a new phenomenon in Canada, which is the middle class homeless. We used to just have young people living in their parents' basements. Now we have parents moving into their children's basements. Will the Prime Minister reverse the inflationary policies that doubled housing costs and are forcing seniors to move into their kids' basements just to avoid going homeless?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable colleague for the question. Canada has a AAA credit rating, the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7, and low unemployment. And in addition, we will always be there to support the middle class, Mr. Speaker, whether it is 6 million old age seniors with the old age security benefit, whether it is 11 million Canadians with the grocery rebate, whether it is 4 million Canadians with the business supports. Mr. Speaker, what we do on this side of the House is invest in Canadians to build a stronger economy day after day, year after year, and we will continue on that course. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Incompetent rating agencies mean absolutely nothing to the, quote, unhoused seniors who say that for affordable housing in Metro Vancouver, that the only thing that turns up is nothing, nothing, and nothing. Nor does it mean anything to, and I quote again, this is even from the CBC, living in his broken down car, homeless man says he has until Thursday to move. We have both nurses and carpenters living in parking lots after 8 years of this Prime Minister doubling housing costs. Will they stop driving up the cost of living so that Canadians can house, feed, and heat their families?
The Honourable Minister.
Very much, Mr. Speaker, and here's the truth for seniors. Fixing the global inflation problem is not going to be fixed by cutting dental support to 3.5 million seniors, and that's what the Leader of the Opposition would do. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, to get to the tens of billions of dollars of cuts he's talking about, it would mean cuts to our healthcare system. It would mean making sure, unfortunately, that the investments like we saw in BC to transform our health system won't happen. What does that mean, Mr. Speaker? It doesn't mean just poor health outcomes. It means more costs in the future. It means a less resilient country, and it means a much worse future for our seniors. That's what he's peddling, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Actually, this government that's promising over $10 billion of cuts right now because they suddenly woke up and realized that they were bankrupt. When we were in office, we actually managed to balance the budget while growing healthcare spending every single year. In fact, growing it faster than the current government. But today, the biggest threat to the health of Canadians is homelessness. People are losing their homes because this Prime Minister has doubled the cost of housing? Will he realize, with people living in parking lots, that after 8 years, he's just not worth the cost?
Mr. Speaker, unlike the party opposite
Lena had ministre.
we don't balance budgets on the backs of Canadians. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we invest in Canadians. Let me give you one example, Mr. Speaker. Lifting almost 500,000 children out of poverty with the Canada Child Benefit. And every single time there's an opportunity to support Canadians, Mr. Speaker, what does the other side of the House do? They vote against. Contre. That is not the way in which we will build a strong economy.
Once again, I'd like to remind members to please conduct themselves in a way that is appropriate. And I'll also ask members to please keep the voices down so the speaker can hear at least what is going on. If not, the members would ask a question. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the member is right about one thing. They don't balance the budget on the backs of Canadians. They run massive inflationary deficits on the backs of Canadians. On another matter, Mr. Speaker, our hearts were broken to see a hospital in Gaza struck by a missile. Disinformation peddled by Hamas and regurgitated by CBC was then amplified by the Prime Minister. Does he agree with President Biden that the offending missile originated with terrorists in Gaza?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, our government has been unequivocal in condemning the terrorist attacks of Hamas against Israeli citizens. We are also adamant that attacks on civilians are wrong. We call on all parties to observe international law. Our hearts go out to the innocent Palestinian victims that have died as a result of this attack, and we will continue to work with partners around the world to call for a humanitarian corridor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of Belleuil-Chamblay.
Dans le terrible conflit qui déchire la bande de Gaza.
The conflict tearing Gaza apart means that civilians are leaving in unspeakable distress. Humanitarian aid needs to get to the Gaza Strip. It needs to be able to get there without condition, regardless of the origin of those conditions. Canada needs a strong voice to do anything in this context. They need to reach out to friends in Israel or Palestine and friends of peace. Will Canada join the initiative with the United States, Germany, France, the UK, and others? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my honourable colleague for the question. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was one of the first to go to that region in order to be there for our Israeli and Palestinian friends. We were one of the first nations to give a strong voice to the situation between Israel and Hamas. And we are there to continue to have a humanitarian corridor, and we are there to defend the rights of all civilians in that zone. The Honourable Leader or Member for Belleuil-Chamblay. The United Nations cannot be heard alone. They need friends and credibility. Am I given to understand that the Prime Minister over the last 11 days has not spoken once to the President of the United States? In the countries neighboring Quebec, they say you have to walk the talk, or les bottines doivent suivre les babines. We need to go beyond good intentions. Should the Prime Minister not consider walking the talk? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the beginning of this truly horrendous crisis for everyone involved, many innocent victims have fallen in that region. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs have been in contact with allies, with stakeholders in the region. We are there to play a leadership role and a collaborative role in order to help resolve this conflict. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Before Thanksgiving, the Minister of Industry said prices for groceries are coming down. Canadians just needed to check out grocery flyers. But now the Prime Minister, or the Minister, is backtracking, saying, well, he's not sure because the grocery CEO's plans are too secret. If the Minister can't get answers, then we will. Will the Minister of Grocery Flyers support our motion to summon the grocery CEOs back to Parliament again?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for the question, Mr. Speaker. I'm really surprised in the way of that question, Mr. Speaker. We did one thing that has never been done in Canadian history. We called the 5 CEOs of the groceries in Ottawa, Mr. Speaker, and we expressed the frustration of 40 million Canadians, Mr. Speaker, about the price of grocery. I would enjoy all members of this House to give the same message that I give. Make sure you help Canadians and help us to stabilize price in Canada. That's what Canadian expects.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Clearly, the Minister's plan to ask them nicely is not working.
That's right.
On va résumer. Un jour.
Let's summarize. One day, the Minister says that they need to check prices in flyers. But now they don't know CEO's plans to stabilize prices because their plans are too secret. It's very clear that the Minister doesn't have a plan, so we can give him one. We tabled a new motion to force CEOs of large grocery chains to come back to appear before committee. Will the government support it? Yes or no? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to hear the question from the Leader of the NDP. Not only is that what we proposed, but I wrote to the chair of the committee to ask the chair to invite the CEOs of large grocery chains in Canada to share their plan with Canadians. So I'm glad to hear his question because we are the ones who asked the chair of the Parliamentary Committee to ask the CEOs to come and appear before Canadians. The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
The government is saying that they have not been briefed on verified intelligence confirmed by the President of the United States that has led to the retraction of media reports around the world about yesterday's explosion by IRGC-backed terrorists that killed innocent civilians in Gaza. After 8 years, is the relationship with our closest allies, our Five Eyes partners, so damaged that they don't even share with Canada what they have already told the rest of the world?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The situation in Gaza is a tragedy. The loss of Palestinian lives is absolutely horrifying. This is an unthinkable act, and it's imperative that innocent Palestinians be protected and that international law be upheld. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Calgary Forest Lawn.
The Business Council of Canada is warning the Liberal NDP government they can no longer run large permanent deficits without fear. After 8 long years, this Prime Minister added more debt than every government between 1867 and 2015 combined, creating 40-year highs in inflation and the fastest interest rate hikes ever. There is a massive fear of a looming mortgage default crisis if they don't balance the budget now. He's just not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister stand up today and support our common sense, fiscally responsible motion to bring in balanced budgets so Canadians can keep their homes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague talks about fear. There is also fear among Canadians that the Conservatives are going to cut programs that they rely on. Mr. Speaker, this week, the Canada Child Benefit checks will arrive at Canadians' doors, Mr. Speaker, and in the members' riding in Calgary Forest Lawn, that means that individuals will get up to $10,000 lowered from their child care fees. Mr. Speaker, there are also 400,000 families in Calgary Forest Lawn that get the Canada Child Benefit checks.
The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
The Prime Minister promised that interest rates were going to remain low, and Canadians believed him, so they went out, they bought homes, and they took out mortgages. But after 8 years of liberal inflationary deficits, interest rates are at a 30-year high, and many Canadian families are now not finding they can't pay their mortgage. In fact, the Business Council of Canada just said governments can't permanently run deficits without fear. So will this finance minister stop running her inflationary deficits so interest rates will come down and Canadian families won't lose their homes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, and of course, allow me to correct the record. There are actually 400,000 families in Alberta collecting the Canada Child Benefit checks, Mr. Speaker. Those checks are coming out this week. And Mr. Speaker, under what the Conservatives are proposing, they would have those checks completely removed. They would be cutting those supports for Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I will remind you that while we continue to support Canadians, we are also running the lowest deficit here in Canada among all G7 countries. Good job.
Député de Dufferin-Caledon.
Mr. Speaker, there's only one cut that we're going to make. We're going to cut about 80 members from that side of the House when we form a common-sense Conservative government. And when we do that, we will address the concerns like the ship worker in Vancouver who's paying $7,500 a month for a mortgage. Wow. And what do they say? They talk about a AAA credit rating. How out of touch. They're gaslighting Canadians. Will they cut these inflationary deficits and get interest rates under control? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to hear the member of the opposition speak about C-SPAN. It is a very important member of the business community in my riding of North Vancouver. I was very pleased a couple of years ago to join the Prime Minister to announce the commitment to build an additional 18 Coast Guard vessels worth almost $16 billion, which will provide well-paid employment for the employees at C-SPAN for decades to come. Mr. Speaker, we are going to create good economic jobs. We are going to ensure economic opportunities for Canadians, and we are going to ensure affordability at the same time.
Here, here. I'm going to ask once again for members to please refrain from taking the floor when they are not been recognized by the chair, and to leave the questions so that they can be answered so that colleagues can hear them.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. In the coming months, we expect to see a wave of mortgage renewals. RBC is going to renew 41% of its mortgages, but it's going to be difficult with interest rates that keep rising. We're seeing inflation on mortgage costs reaching over 30% a month. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, nothing's going right. Will he explain to people how they're going to pay their mortgages and not end up in the street? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, Statistics Canada gave us good news. Inflation went down again here in Canada. Our government continues to work to help Canadians that are having trouble making ends meet. In this House, we have a bill before parliamentarians that will stabilize grocery prices throughout Canada. The Conservatives are playing political games with measures that could help Canadians. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. I'm not sure where she read that good news, because we heard from Statistics Canada that inflation went up in Quebec and hit 4.8%. That's the fourth month in a row that Quebec has had the highest inflation rate in Canada. Food inflation's at 6.7% after 8 years under this Prime Minister with his help from the Bloc. People are literally having trouble feeding their families. Are these the sunny ways promised 8 years ago? This Liberal government's not worth the cost. Does the Prime Minister recognize that in Canada in 2023 it's shameful for people to struggle to feed themselves? The Honourable Minister.
Allô, je suis là, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
I'm here, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to affordability, we need to help all Canadians, and that's exactly what we're doing on this side of the House. This morning, we've heard a statement that 98% of housing starts are due to programs that will help Canadians get a roof, and we're going to continue to work on that. The Honourable Member for Davignon, Lamitis, Matane-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, S&P Global revealed that Canada is going to be one of the world's leading oil producers by 2024. Forget the green transition. Canada is going to be one of the biggest oil producers on the planet. The Conservatives applaud this, but it's not their doing. It's the Liberals doing. Under their watch, oil production went up by 10% in the midst of a climate crisis. Under their watch, Canada will produce 500,000 more barrels of oil every day. Is that really the environmental record Liberals want to leave as their legacy?
I'd like to ask before the minister answers the question, I'd like to ask the member from Signal Hill to please wait his turn to be recognized by the chair to take the floor. The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable collègue sait que le cause de changement.
My honourable colleagues know that climate change is caused by greenhouse gas emissions, and we're going to reduce those emissions in every sector of the economy. We have a detailed plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to grow an economy that will be prosperous in an economy that will be low in carbon. And that's what we're going to continue to do. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Canada is going to become a worldwide driver for oil production 2024 thanks to Trans Mountain. Trans Mountain is going to enable Canada to break oil production records and therefore break pollution records. But taxpayers are paying for Trans Mountain, and it's costing us $30.9 billion. $30.9 billion is almost $800 a person, including babies. The Liberals are charging us $800 each to pollute more. Not to mention subsidies and the costs of natural disasters. How dare the Liberals ask Quebecers to pay to pollute more? The Honourable Minister. I thank my colleague for her question, but I'm wondering why she's not talking about what the government has done recently. We recently announced the biggest investment in the history of Quebec called Northvolt. That's going to make batteries for electric vehicles. My colleague should have focused on that issue because not only will Quebec be a champion of the car industry, it's going to be a champion of the green economy. That's what we're doing.
Député de Peterborough-Kawartha.
Over and over, this Liberal NDP government promised interest rates would not go up. But after 8 miserable years of this Prime Minister, Canadians know that is not true. Mortgage defaults and forced home sales are on the rise. Lindsay is one of hundreds who wrote to me to tell me about her skyrocketing mortgage rate. She's paying an extra $1,250 a month. She doesn't have an extra $1,250 a month. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. So when will he stop his inflationary spending so Canadians like Lindsay can keep their home?
Secrétaire parlementaire.
Mr. Speaker, last week I had the opportunity to visit Peterborough, that member's riding, where I announced $42 million for the construction or renovation of over 1,100 units of housing. You know what's interesting, Mr. Speaker? Wow. That member voted against every program that made that funding possible, Mr. Speaker, and then she tried to take credit for it. It's astounding what the Conservatives continue to do. What Canadians need is a government to be behind them, to see more construction built, to see the Canada Child Benefit continue to have an effect. Dental care, child care, they're against all of those, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Calgary-Mindeport.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal government, the deficit continues to rise. In March, the finance minister said that this year the deficit was going to be $40 billion. Well, the parliamentary budget officer just told us that she was off by at least $6 billion. Wow. Earlier this month in a Senate committee, finance officials couldn't even say what the Liberal NDP government is spending on debt interest charges. This Prime Minister simply isn't worth the cost. So when will this Prime Minister come up with a plan to balance the budget so Canadians can keep their homes?
Mr. Speaker, I find it highly shocking that Albertans from the Conservative Party in this House are absolutely silent on a matter that really affects the middle class in Alberta. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the government of Alberta trying to take Alberta pensioners out of the Canadian pension plan, destabilizing the pension plan for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. They talk a big game in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, but when it comes to actually defending Albertans, they sit on the sidelines while we have their backs.
The honourable member from Mégantic-Lérard. After years of inflationary spending, the Prime Minister has literally killed the dream of young Quebecers to become homeowners. Imagine a young Montrealer has to earn $116,000 a year in order to buy a house, which doesn't include a 20% down payment. How can a young person earn that kind of salary and put money aside for that? After 8 years, did the Liberals realize that the Prime Minister is not worth the cost and that people in the middle class can no longer afford a Prime Minister that's mortgaging their future? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What Montrealers don't understand is why Conservatives are delaying the implementation of measures that will help build more apartments, more homes throughout the country. We have a bill before this House, and the Conservatives, even those who said publicly they'd vote for it, well, they don't want it to move forward. We're being slowed down. And we can't deliver because the Conservatives are delaying a bill in this House, and it's shameful. The honourable member from Mégantic-Lérard. The Liberals should have called so that we could discuss it. They're the ones who are delaying passage of this bill after 8 years of the consequences of Liberal action are disastrous. In Quebec, inflation is the highest in the country, nearly 5% for the 4th month in a row. Like all parents in Quebec, I'm worried for my children's future. They're going to be facing the highest interest rates in the last 40 years. Food is too expensive, rent is unaffordable, and interest rates are skyrocketing. When will they stop mortgaging the future of our children? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know the Conservatives love to claim that they can give us lessons in economics, but the last time they were in power, not only did they leave behind a mess for Liberals to clean up, they cut in pensions, they cut in EI, they cut in border security, the army, federal prisons in science and research. Here, we support economic growth, but the Conservatives are only good for axing. They're not so good at calculating.
Then I have Député de Vancouver Est.
The City of Toronto and housing advocates warn that unhoused people will die as the weather gets colder. Toronto's shelter system, the largest in Canada, is beyond capacity. Hundreds of people are being turned away every day, including refugees and asylum seekers. Successive Liberal and Conservative governments walked away from housing and left the city scrambling to house people in need. Toronto is pleading for support. Will the Liberals step up and provide the funding required to the City of Toronto so that no one has to sleep or die on the streets this winter?
Hear, hear.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Mr. Speaker, I've worked with that member for a number of years now, and I don't doubt for a moment her commitment to housing. And she knows, because she voted for it, that we doubled the funding for homelessness through the Reaching Home initiative. And in fact, Toronto has received $290 million to combat homelessness. We will continue to work with not-for-profit organizations that are on the ground doing the vital work to get people off the street and providing them with the wraparound supports that they need to make a transition towards something better.
Here.
Good job.
L'honorable député de Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, homelessness in Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, and Port Moody is up by 86%. Community leaders from the Tri-Cities Homeless and Housing Task Group are calling for political courage. I agree. People unable to find a home is past the point of a crisis, and with colder weather on its way, action is needed. But the Liberals are out of touch, and their lack of concern is appalling. What are the Liberals going to do to get people into affordable homes before the winter?
L'honorable député, l'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
This government was the first government in Canadian history, in fact, to recognize that there is a human right to housing. And we continue to act in that vein through the National Housing Strategy, a strategy that has resulted in 70,000 people being taken off the street, 122,000 people who were very close to being homeless, no longer in that position because of the vital supports that they've been given. They are now housed. We'll continue to do everything we can, and we embrace partnership through working with provinces, municipalities, and I emphasize not-for-profit organizations that are key to all of this.
Good job. L'honorable député de Kings Hants.
Speaker, our government is focused on helping Atlantic Canada drive the tremendous economic opportunities that exist for clean energy in our region. That's exactly why we advanced Bill C-49 in close partnership with Newfoundland and Labrador and Nova Scotia. We also have a mutual goal of getting off coal-fired electricity while expanding clean energy grids. Premier Higgs and Houston were both in Ottawa this week to talk about their provincial plans to do just that. Can the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources explain how our government is working in cooperation with Nova Scotia and New Brunswick to support that crucial transition while being mindful of affordability? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable ministre.
Thank you to the member for his continuous advocacy for Atlantic Canadians. He and his Atlantic Liberal colleagues stood up against the Conservatives who opposed Bill C-49, including Conservative members from Atlantic Canada, whose communities will benefit from the good, sustainable jobs and economic opportunities that this act will bring. This week, Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick agreed to advance collaboration and progress on delivering clean, affordable, and reliable electricity while phasing out coal by 2030, driving to net zero electricity grid by 2035. This will fight climate change and create good jobs and economic opportunity across Atlantic Canada.
L'honorable député de Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the State Department updated their travel advisory to Lebanon to the highest level, advising all U.S. citizens of the following: do not travel to Lebanon. But the government's overall travel advisory for Lebanon advises Canadian citizens to avoid non-essential travel, which is not the highest level. Why is this government always a dollar short and a day late when it comes to protecting the safety and security of Canadians overseas?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would disagree with the honourable member. We are never late protecting Canadians We will always stand up for the security and safety of Canadians here in Canada and abroad. As the Speaker knows, yesterday the Minister indicated that Canadians in Lebanon should make plans to leave. We are aware that the situation could be volatile there, so we want to make sure Canadians are safe. So she has advised Canadians to leave the area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable député de Wellington, Halton Hills.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the government has been late. It was late in the fall of Kabul in August of 2021. Has the government not learned the lessons of 2006 and 2021 of Beirut and Kabul? Throughout the Middle East and North Africa, there has been an outbreak of protests and violence targeting Western interests and Western missions. Will the government clearly communicate to Canadians information necessary to ensure their safety and inform Canadians about security threats they are facing in the region in a timely manner?
Hear, hear.
Le secrétaire parlementaire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, Mr. Speaker, we have, and we will continue to. These decisions are made by officials on the best advice. We will continue. We will continue, as we always do, to ensure that Canadians are safe when they are abroad. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, 8 years of inflationary Liberal policies have forced Quebecers deeper into debt. We learned today that Quebec is Canada's inflation champion for the 4th month in a row. Groceries, housing, gas, everything's more expensive, courtesy of the Liberals with Bloc support. And the experts don't see any change anytime soon. Can this government finally offer Quebecers some concrete solutions and quit their reckless spending and get rid of the carbon tax? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm always surprised that there are Conservatives from Quebec talking about the carbon tax because, Mr. Speaker, there is no carbon tax, no federal carbon tax in Quebec. Quebec is a leader when it comes to action against climate change. Mr. Speaker, we don't want to backtrack under the Conservatives. We don't want to stop our action to protect our environment in Quebec. The Conservatives are completely out of touch. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, 8 years of inflationary Liberal policies have forced Quebecers deeper into debt. Young people are afraid they'll never be able to own a home. Others are suffering from financial anxiety. In spite of this, the government and the Bloc are supporting an increase to the carbon tax. We can't say it often enough. A vote for the Bloc will cost you. Why doesn't the Prime Minister give Quebecers a break and backtrack on his inflationary carbon tax? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, my colleague talks about cutting, but where? In housing? Is there too much money going to housing? Is it pensions? Does she think our seniors are getting too much money? Is it dental care? Is it child care? Perhaps culture? Because they're so happy to make cuts in those areas. Which would they choose? They should stand up and say where they're going to make the cuts. The Honourable Member for Shefford. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals committed a terrible injustice when they created 2 classes of seniors by refusing to increase the OAS for 65 to 74-year-olds. Today, they have a historic opportunity to fix it. They can treat all seniors fairly in the face of a soaring cost of living and economic uncertainty. Will they support the Bloc's bill, C319, and put an end to 2 classes of seniors by increasing pensions for everyone 65 and over? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we've made huge progress in helping seniors out. This has helped reduce poverty among those 65 and over. We restored the retirement age to 65. We increased the GIS, despite the constant opposition from the Bloc. And yes, we increased the OAS for the most vulnerable seniors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Shefford. Mr. Speaker, that's not right. If seniors were satisfied with the federal government, groups that represent them like the AREQ, the AQRP, and the AFES wouldn't be on the Hill today. They're here to ask the government to support C319. Seniors are the ones telling us that C319 will make a difference in their lives. They're the ones saying that only a fair pension increase for all seniors will protect them from financial insecurity. That's what seniors want from the Liberals. Will they finally listen and support the bill? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we restored the retirement age. We brought it back down from 67 to 65. We increased the GIS. And we did this in spite of the Bloc's opposition. We increased the OAS for those seniors that are the most vulnerable and for those with in need of dental care and other care. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy Abbotsford. Today, this House will vote on whether to protect the mentally ill against assisted suicide. But yesterday, the Justice Minister falsely claimed that euthanizing vulnerable Canadians was good public policy and the only way to comply with Canadian law. Meanwhile, we're hearing more and more reports of Canadians crying out for help and being offered assisted suicide instead. Is this the sorry state of our mental health system? Millions of Canadians oppose this government's fascination with assisted death. Will this government now bring a full stop to this madness?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And of course, there is not one among us in this House that doesn't have people that we love that are deeply vulnerable, that have been in a state of mental health crisis. And every single person in this House wants to make sure that those people get the support and strength they need. That's why we're making critical investments there. But we also have to make sure that people who are trapped in mental illness and deep, profound suffering, that we examine what's the best way to deal with those circumstances. That's why we're working to reconstitute the Joint Committee so that we can look at this process, look at how we responsibly deal with these issues in a way that respects and protects vulnerable people.
Then I have Deputy de Ban-Fairtree.
Each year on November 11th, we gather to remember those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our nation. But now, under this Liberal government, our military chaplains are being told they can't even pray for the fallen. During World War II, chaplains led prayer on the boats on the eve of the D-Day landings. And chaplains have provided last rites to dying soldiers in the fields. But now, the Prime Minister is telling Canadians that on Remembrance Day, they can't even pray for those who fought for our country? What is going on, Mr. Speaker?
Here, here.
Veterans over there? Shameful. That's hideous.
Stephen. L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Monsieur le Président, écoutez, aujourd'hui.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to give a shout out to our veterans and all those who've served our country. Everyone, to all these people, we need to say thank you. Thank you to the men and women who, particularly at this point in time, are defending what we do. And November 11th, as it is for many of my friends and colleagues here, on November 11th, we will remember and we will never forget everything our veterans have done for us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow. Shameful. Wow. Shameful answer. Wow. Unacceptable.
L'honorable député de
Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are discriminating against people of faith who are wanting to pay tribute to our veterans. And it's bad Liberal policy that is actually driving down morale in the Canadian Armed Forces. It was reported that troops are leaving the forces in droves because of the lack of good, affordable housing. And sadly, military families are being forced to ask for donations to help offset the high cost of food and housing. After 8 long years, the troops can no longer afford these Liberals or will make that sacrifice. When will the Prime Minister finally start supporting our troops?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Monsieur le Président, I don't take any lessons today from this side of the House. Because you know what, Mr. President? When they were in power, they actually cut spending, fall below 1%. Let me be very clear. Military members and their families are our top priorities. And we're taking steps to ensure that they are supported. In our budget 2022, we've invested $55 million in residential housing for CAF. We will be there for our troops. We will always support them, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues, because the parliamentary secretary was close to me, I was able to hear her answer. I'm not certain if other members were able to hear her as clearly. Colleagues, I do ask you to please cede the floor to the person who's been recognized by the chair to be able to answer the question so that you can answer it. You can ask again. The honourable member from Madawaska Restigouche.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the Acadian community in New Brunswick and the proud member for Madawaska Restigouche, I'm pleased to repeat the announcement that was made a short while ago about the Acadian National Celebration for 2024. My colleagues and I, Acadians, want to ensure that these celebrations continue to enjoy support from the federal government. Can the Minister of Canadian Heritage explain how the federal government is supporting the Acadian community, its culture, and its celebrations?
The
Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I have to say that my colleagues worked very hard on the announcement that was made today, and I thank them for their cooperation. The announcement today reasserts the federal government's commitment to Acadian culture and history. And with the announcement today, we are going to be providing the $500,000 that is needed. So the we're rounding up to with a $250,000 commitment, and this is great news. And it is added to the funding for the Acadian Convention that is soon to come.
Honorable Député de Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, no one is above the law. This includes the Prime Minister. And after 8 years, he is the only one in Canadian history found guilty of breaking not one, but 2 ethics laws. And now with the Rise scam, the RCMP is investigating criminality in the highest echelons of this government. And what is the Prime Minister's response? He shuts down debate. He shuts down committee, and now he hides behind cabinet confidence. He is not worth the cost. Under dark clouds of suspicion, will the Prime Minister cooperate now with several RCMP investigations?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the member opposite should know by this time, the Prime Minister does not dictate committees. In fact, it is the responsibility of members in this House to determine what the committees decide to move forward with. But with that being said, Mr. Speaker, we have faith and trust in the RCMP and those that are set to investigate any accusations of wrongdoing. Mr. Speaker, we look forward to any reports that come forward from the RCMP, and Mr. Speaker, any form of misconduct will have consequences.
May I remind the member from Brantford Brant to please, he had the opportunity to ask his question, to please listen to the response without comment. The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, Speaker, Canadians would love for reports to come from the RCMP, but this Prime Minister is hiding behind cabinet confidences in the NDP Liberal coalition to keep Canadians in the dark about wrongdoing. That's why they weren't able to launch that criminal investigation into this government. And if you can believe it, there's a $1 billion so-called green slush fund that through misappropriation and conflicts of interest, this government has had to suspend because there's $150 million taxpayer dollars that have been mismanaged. Now whistleblowers are looking for employment and reprisal protection, but we know that this government will do what they always do and throw a whistleblower under the bus, just like they did with Jody Wilson-Raybould when she called out corrupt Liberals. Will they protect these whistleblowers?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for the question, and for Canadians watching at home, remember to this House what are the facts. The moment, Mr. Speaker, that we heard about the allegation of misconduct, we immediately commissioned a third-party independent expert to investigate these allegations. They reported back to me, and Mr. Speaker, we have suspended, in good governance, the funds that would be disbursed to protect the interest of Canadians, and I can assure this member that we'll take all measures required to make sure that proper governance is applied in all agencies of the Government of Canada.
It's not true, though. PSPC knew in advance.
Député de Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, the Supreme Court has declared the Liberal No More Pipelines Act unconstitutional. Ignoring concerns from Canadians, the Prime Minister and his Minister for Carbon Taxes seemed hell-bent on destroying our natural resource sector. After 8 years of this Prime Minister's anti-resource agenda, Canadians are suffering. Common-sense Conservatives will advocate for our natural resource sector. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Mr. Speaker, when will this NDP Liberal government do the right thing and repeal this disastrous bill?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, I think Canadians understand that when the Conservative Party was in power, they gutted the environmental legislation that existed in this country in 2012. They undermined the confidence that Canadians had that the environment was going to be protected, that the rights of Indigenous peoples would be respected, such that good projects could go ahead. We have put into place a system of better rules that ensure environmental sustainability, respect for Indigenous rights, that will accelerate the work that we are doing to ensure that good projects move ahead. With respect to the Supreme Court decision, there are some surgical tweaks that we will make to ensure that we actually move forward.
The honourable member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Jews in Canada represent just 1% of the population. Yet, as Irwin Cotler reminds us, they are victims of 67% of reported hate crimes in Canada. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, and Mr. Speaker, Islamophobia is too. I met with Jewish students yesterday who are afraid to be outed as Jews in their own community for fear of their safety. I have spoken with Muslims who are afraid to be outed as Muslims in their own communities for fear of their safety. Can the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion let us know what role the government is playing in addressing the real anxieties of Jews and Muslims in Canada right now? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I first want to acknowledge just how difficult the past few days and weeks have been, both for the Jewish and Muslim communities, and I want them to know that all of us here stand with and in solidarity with the communities. On Monday, Mr. Speaker, we announced the appointment of Ms. Deborah Lyons as Canada's Special Envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. And as she stated, Mr. Speaker, she will work closely with her counterpart, the Special Envoy on combating Islamophobia, to support both communities communities during this difficult time when feelings of anxiety, tensions, and fear are on the rise, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, diversity is at the core of who we are as Canadians. We all need to be united in standing up against hate and intolerance whenever, wherever.
L'honorable député de North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, those who join the Canadian Forces do so because they believe in service to their country. Now members are leaving their jobs because they can't keep up with rising house costs. Those who keep us safe can't afford a home. And the Liberals and Conservative solution? Leave housing to condo developers who keep costs so high. The people who serve us deserve better. What is this government going to do to ensure that members of the Canadian Armed Forces do not become homeless?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Monsieur le Président, I want to say thanks to the member for raising, and I know how advocate she has brought forward a lot of issues in this House. But let me be very clear. Military members and their families are our top priorities, and we're taking steps to ensure that they are supported. This is why we're working with our stakeholders to align resources and acquire additional housing, Mr. Speaker. In our budget 2022-2023 alone, we've invested $55 million in residential housing for our CAF member. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
L'honorable député de Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The incredible irony here is that the portions of the impact assessment law the Supreme Court found were in excess of federal jurisdiction were the sections created by Stephen Harper in wrecking our previous predictable, strong environmental assessment legislation, the so-called designated project list, which was a very bad idea, the expert environmental law panel created under former Minister McKenna and then ignored by the government in bringing forward C-69, has the answers the government needs. Will this minister commit to reviewing those recommendations and putting them in place?
L'honorable ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we can agree that the Conservative Party destroyed environmental legislation in this country, undermined the integrity of those processes, such that it was incumbent on the new government to actually bring into place better rules that would allow major projects to be built in this country, that respected environmental rights, that respected the rights of Indigenous peoples. We have delivered that. We certainly respect the decision of the court. We will be making amendments to the Act, but the Supreme Court was clear, let me be very clear about this, that Parliament can enact legislation to protect the environment, and we certainly will continue to do that.
This brings to the end of oral questions. Colleagues,